Portugal Internet Week 2010. De 10 a 17 de outubro, acompanha as diversas iniciativas que vão tornar Portugal um caso de sucesso na economia digital. Mais informação em portugalinternetweek.com.
And what happens to time spent when you are a multi-screen user? Well, in fact, it becomes more interactive. So the normal relationship across Europe where you would see a higher amount of hours spent watching television than using the internet, that swaps over when you are a multi-screen user into more time being spent using the internet rather than watching television. So what impact does this have on e-commerce, and why is it important for the e-commerce business? So what these figures show here is what people take into consideration when they're making their purchase decisions. Now, we have a whole list of these, and I've just pulled out a few which I think are relevant to our conversation today. So the things that always and internally will be important to consumers when they buy things is what other people say to them. And that's absolutely true whether it's on the internet, whether it's on the high street or anywhere. So if you look at the figures here, the blue column is all internet users, and that's showing us that around 46% of people rely on online reviews or by other customers 43% in terms of making their purchase decision. But the multi-screen users, they have a much higher score, both for what we call online word of mouth and for both advertising and e-commerce sites. So that means to me that as the consumer evolves, the role of the internet becomes even more important in terms of determining the purchase journey and what exact product the user will buy at the end of the day. Now, a point relevant to Portugal here is that normally with these figures, if you look country by country, you will see the country with the most developed advertising market having the highest score here for the websites of well-known brands and well-known retailers. But here in Portugal, those figures are just as high as, for example, the UK or the Nordic markets. So what that tells me is that the consumer here in Portugal is very able, very empowered technically, and takes a great deal of notice of advertising online and the ability to use the internet to purchase. And if you ask people across Europe whether they feel they're better able to buy products and services as a result of the internet or make travel bookings, etc., those figures go up hugely for these multi-screen users. So what about e-commerce in Portugal? Well, we have an e-commerce section to the study, and that enables us to compare the percentage of internet users who shop online for various products in Portugal and compare those with the rest of Europe. And what you see for Portugal is, oops, oh, that's come out slightly oddly over there. The figures have got a little bit blurred with this interface. But what you see for Portugal is the very straightforward purchases, so for example, books, DVDs, etc., those are very similar to the European averages, but more exotic purchases, those are still a little bit behind. So the Portuguese consumer is moving very well forward in their internet journey, and you can see strong increases year on year. So moving from e-commerce to ad spend. Now, we looked a little while ago at the differences across Europe in internet penetration and in how people respond to the internet. Well, I would have to say that within ad spend, the differences are even stronger. So when we think about the percentage of overall ad spend that goes on the internet, there are huge differences between the UK, the Nordics, and going down to Eastern Europe. So what we have here is what I call the online ad spend heat map. So you can see the stronger colour is where you've got now up to 10%, up to 20% of total ad investment going online. And where you move down to the white, that's where you've still got around 5% of total ad investment going online. And what you see across Europe is that in terms of market volume, UK, France and Germany account for 60% of online advertising spend across Europe. So there's still a lot of groundwork to be done in moving forward some of these other markets. And I guess that's why we're all here today to discuss how best we do that. And to give you an idea of some of the trends that we're seeing at the moment in online advertising, I think that illustrates one of the difficulties, which is that the market is just developing so quickly. So not only are we talking about display and search, but we've got all these other elements coming into the mix that are growing so quickly that advertisers and agencies need to stay abreast of them. So some of the things that we're expecting to see this year, for example, the growth of online display ad spending. So last year was quite a search-dominated year as people retreated to the very obvious forms of online advertising. But this year, we're seeing a resurgence of display advertising. We're seeing video advertising growing between 40 and 50% year on year. As Thomas said, that's something that's going to be growing very quickly. Mobile advertising also, that's in the region of 40 to 50% per year. And social media. I was looking at a chart the other day which told me that social media and search, the amount of time versus the ad spend on either, you can swap them around. So people spend around 30% of their media time using social media, but only 3% of budget is spent on it. And people spend 30% of their advert budgets on search, but actually they only spend 3% of their time searching. So that tells us something about the inconsistencies out there in time spent and where the money is spent. And also, now we're seeing a growth of sophisticated ad networks, which are changing and adding complexity to how the market works. And I think that the next chart really underlines the complexity, not only for us as trade associations trying to help the market grow, but really for all of the new entrants to the market in understanding how it all works and where are all the different routes to get their business successful. So if you think about the old days where you just had a media model, the advertiser, the agency, and the client, in these days the internet has a great deal more complexity to it. So what that means for us as a trade association is that we have to work across various different areas in trying to demystify the industry for everybody, in holding conferences such as this, in having educational programs into how all the new techniques work, and helping both traditional companies and small internet startups to gain their place in the digital economy. A lot of what we do is around research and education, so trying to do more research projects to show how online works, and also in providing data and transparency. And one of the things that I think is very often said about the internet market is there is tons of data, but how do you manage to see your way through it? So we need to find transparent data. We need to be very clear about the figures that we give to people. And we need to act as a market to back up our data. We also need to provide networking forums so that people can grow their businesses through meeting the right people. And as Thomas mentioned at the end of his presentation, we need to be able to talk to the regulators to act responsibly as an industry, to take the business forward in an atmosphere of trust and empowerment. So that's my presentation for today. I've talked about two of our studies, Mediascope Europe and the Ad Barometer, talking about ad spend trends. So if you've got any questions, I'd be delighted to take them at the end. And thank you very much.